So this is my Toyota Hiace super long wheelbase van conversion part 1. On this video I'm going to be covering the removal of the seats, removal of a wheelchair lift that was stuck in the back, and just give you a quick overall look at the van I bought. So as you can see, it's a 2005, so quite an old model given the fact it's now 2024. But the overall condition of the van is quite nice. It does have some small scratches and dents on it, but pretty nice motor. Mechanically it was very sound. Given the fact that this is now being recorded, or I'm now annotating this 7 months later, I can tell you for a fact, thus far it has been very mechanically good. It did have some things with it before I decided to do my van build, or before I could get into the build itself. The first one being the fact that it had an absolutely ginormous wheelchair lift in the back, as you can see here. This thing was an absolute nightmare to get rid of. I wish I had video footage of it, and in fact I did have video footage of me getting the wheelchair lift out. It was a 2-person job. I've stupidly deleted the videos, so I'm kind of left with some limited footage of it, but if you have any more questions, I'm happy to help out with that. Anything you need to know, please let me reply to you in the comments, or leave a comment and I will respond to it in future videos. So here you can see me very awkwardly working in my driveway space, or at least the driveway that I was using at the time. Limited space, limited access, but I was trying to make the best of it. I had to get all of the seats out of the back of the van. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably thinking about getting a Toyota Hiace yourself. And if it has seats in the back, and if it has a wheelchair lift like mine did, then these are obstacles you are going to come across, and are things that you have to remove. A lot of it is quite straightforward. So one thing I will say is, if you are wondering if this is a job you can do yourself, I'll be straight up with you, 100% you can do this yourself. It's a lot of messing about and it takes a lot of time, but none of these things that I've done require a particular amount of skill or finesse to complete. It just takes a bit of time. A lot of it is just removing nuts and bolts. Very awkward work. As you can see, I was previously pointing out some of the nuts and bolts that go through the floor of the van, and they're just very difficult to get to, but it is doable. It is possible. The old fella there helping me out, absolute legend. His name is Norm. I was staying at his place at the time that I bought this van, and he very kindly has a very good skill set, and he helped me with some parts of this van build, including the removal of the wheelchair lift. A lot of it was just disconnections, and then having to essentially get rid of nuts and bolts. These big plates, big steel plates, were underneath the van, and essentially the way the wheelchair lift was stuck in the back of the van is they'd like drill through the floor of the van, put these big bolts through, and then they had the plates underneath the van where I am now, and then they kind of put the nuts and bolts together. As you can see on this one here where I'm pointing out, you can see a steel plate, and they've essentially connected it that way, and there was like 4 or maybe more of these plates that I had to get through. Here you can see me very awkwardly at the last part of me attempting to get rid of the spare wheel that was in the way. I found a lot of the work for this, not this part of the van build anyway, not necessarily that difficult, but it was just very awkward. You're working around pipes, you're underneath the van. I had to get rid of the spare tire to get access to a lot of the things I needed to get access to. So spare tire's down. I've got the plates in place there. So I'm pointing out kind of the nuts and bolts that I need to loosen. This was potentially the worst part of my year, having to undo these nuts and bolts. As you can see here, I'm having a great old time. There's an awesome amount of range of motion there for me to be able to use the socket. So yeah, I'm having a great time doing that. Loving it, living the dream. But yeah, this is me starting the conversion for my van build. So before I could get into the nitty gritty of like renovating the van and as you'll see in future videos, kind of putting the walls in, putting the bed in, putting a TV in, all this good stuff, I had to get rid of what was already in there. And that started with essentially getting rid of all of the seats and getting rid of the big wheelchair lift in the back. I was hoping to sell them because I know the wheelchair lift would have been a very expensive thing and I could have maybe got some of my money back. But it's just such a niche market for the wheelchair lift, so I ended up actually giving it away to somebody who I hoped would make better use of it than me. It's one of those things, I guess, if you need the wheelchair lift, it's it's a lifesaver, isn't it? So I was very happy to give it away to someone who potentially needed it. What I had to do here is, after I'd got rid of all of the seats and the wheelchair lift in the van, I was left with heaps of quite massive holes that ran from the floor inside the van to the underneath of the van here. So what I did is I got Sikaflex, plenty of Sikaflex, plenty of warm soapy water, and what I did is I attempted to patch each and every single hole, because the last thing that I wanted when I'm on my journey and my travels is to wake up to find that like 5,000 cockroaches have like crawled through these holes that I've left in the van, and they're now like inhabiting my lifestyle. So yeah, this was a very arduous, long, kind of boring task, but it was a job that I felt had to be done. And if you have seats in your Toyota Hiace, or if you're doing your van build and you have seats in there, you may well have to do the same thing. So here's me with the Sikaflex, patching every single hole. Again, I've sped it up because it's quite long and boring. I had to cut a lot of the video footage down. I'd have the GoPro on my head and I was probably recording this for about 45 minutes, just patching holes. I started watching it back and I was like, there is no way anybody is going to stay awake whilst watching this. So cut it down, but I had to patch every single hole, and then I went over it with warm soapy water just to smooth off the finish and make sure there was no air gaps, so I felt like it was secure enough. So this was part one of my van build. Removing the interior things, removing the chairs, removing the wheelchair lift. This has now given me a big empty space to work with, and I hope you look forward to part two, where we'll get into laying the flooring.